Mary Ann Murphy was a beloved botanist in the quiet town of Harlow Bend. Dexar Reeve was a forgotten face from her past, a man no one remembered, but who had been watching her for years. When Mary vanished without a trace, it took months before anyone discovered the truth. She hadn't disappeared. She had been taken. In the quiet town of Harlow Bend, surrounded by thick pine woods and foggy hillsides, lived a woman named Mary Ann Murphy. She was 32 years old, intelligent, introverted, and known for her passion for plants. She worked as a botanist at the local research center and often spent hours in the woods cataloging rare species of mosses, fungi, and herbs. Mary didn't have many friends, but she wasn't lonely. She kept to herself, lived in a small cottage near the edge of the forest, and preferred the company of nature over people. Those who knew her described her as kind but distant, private but polite. One Thursday morning in early April, Mary didn't show up for work. At first, her co-workers weren't concerned. She occasionally took unannounced field trips to collect samples, and she usually informed someone after the fact. But by noon, when she still hadn't responded to any calls or emails, her supervisor became uneasy. By late afternoon, a wellness check was requested. When local police arrived at Mary's cottage, everything seemed eerily normal. Her car was parked neatly in the driveway, keys hanging on the wall hook inside, her wallet still in her bag near the door. Her cell phone was found charging next to her bed, undisturbed, with no recent messages or calls. Her bed was made, her kitchen clean. A cup of tea sat cold on the counter as if she had stepped away just moments earlier. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle. Nothing was stolen, and nothing seemed out of place, except for one thing. Her hiking boots were missing. The pair she always wore for long walks in the woods was gone, yet the rest of her gear, including her field notebook and GPS tracker, remained untouched. The back door to the forest path was unlocked. Police theorized that she had taken a walk early in the morning and perhaps gotten lost. A search party was assembled that evening and continued for days. Volunteers, police, officers, and rescue dogs combed through the woods, covering miles in every direction. Helicopters scanned from above. Nothing turned up. No clothing, no footprints, not a single clue. It was as if Mary had simply vanished into the trees without a trace. As time passed, hope began to fade. The search effort slowed. The posters around town began to weather and tear. And people in Harlow Bend started whispering. Whispers turned into theories. Some believed she ran away, escaping a quiet life she had never truly wanted. Others suspected suicide, saying that living in isolation might have taken a toll on her mental health. But the people who knew Mary didn't accept those theories. They said she loved her life. She loved her plants, her solitude, her little routines. She was content in her own world. One person who couldn't let go was her younger brother, Nolan Murphy, who lived 2 towns over. He insisted that something was wrong. He spent weeks investigating on his own, talking to neighbors, collecting anything that might point to an answer. He discovered that Mary had made a large purchase online just 3 days before disappearing, a rare orchid only found in the tropics. Why would someone planning to run away or harm themselves spend hundreds on a plant she would never get to see? More oddities came to light. Her internet history showed she had searched for home security systems and how to spot hidden cameras the week before she vanished. She had also ordered a can of pepper spray. These small details painted a new picture, one that suggested she had felt threatened or uneasy in her final days. Nolan brought all this to the police, who reopened the case with more seriousness. A detective named Marla Day was assigned to lead the investigation. She started interviewing people in Mary's circle, her co-workers, her few acquaintances, her old students from the botany center. One name came up more than once, and it wasn't someone Nolan had ever heard of. A man named Orrin Latch. He had attended one of Mary's weekend botanical retreats 2 years earlier and apparently tried to keep in touch long after it ended. She had once described him as intense in an old email to a colleague. No one had seen or heard from him recently, but that was about to change. And with it, the twisted mystery of Mary Ann Murphy would begin to unravel. 3 weeks after Mary Ann Murphy's disappearance, the atmosphere in Harlow Bend had changed. The spring breeze no longer felt fresh. It carried unease. Her once peaceful cottage had turned into a haunting landmark. People walked by with lowered voices, and cars slowed down near the driveway as if expecting to glimpse a ghost. Despite extensive searches and media attention, no sign of Mary had emerged. But that changed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, when a forensic team was sent back to sweep Mary's home one more time before the case went cold. The officers moved slowly, checking drawers, floors, behind furniture, anywhere something could be hidden. One of them, a junior investigator named Tessa Gorick, noticed that the ash in the fireplace didn't look fully burned. Most of it was black and gray, but one section looked oddly beige, as if paper had been half burned but not fully consumed. She carefully pulled it apart, revealing fragments of a crumpled letter, its edges scorched and brittle. Most of the ink had faded, but a few lines were still visible. What stood out immediately were words written in frantic strokes, "Watching me again," and "He followed me home." But the most chilling detail was a name scribbled in the corner: Orrin Latch. This was the first solid lead in weeks. Detective Marla Day ran the name through local and state databases. Orrin Latch had no criminal record, but he did have a strange online presence. His social media pages were filled with dark paintings, strange botanical references, and quotes about beauty and decay. One particular series of oil paintings caught the detective's attention. They depicted a woman in a forest, her features resembling Mary. Each painting grew darker, with the woman appearing more distorted and trapped in each canvas. Orrin lived on the outskirts of town, in a weathered house hidden by overgrown hedges and thorny vines. When police visited, he didn't resist. He welcomed them inside with a calmness that felt unnatural. The house was dimly lit, walls covered in charcoal sketches and oil paintings. Some were beautiful, others were disturbing. Women with hollow eyes, twisted limbs, or their mouths sewn shut. In the back room, investigators found what they feared: multiple portraits of Mary, each more recent than the last. Some seemed to capture her inside her home, as if drawn from memory or surveillance. They also found a locked drawer. Inside was a small black journal filled with handwritten notes. Orrin had written pages about Mary, calling her his muse, his salvation, and his punishment. He wrote of dreams where she screamed from under the earth, and passages describing how her spirit lingered in the woods. Despite the strange and obsessive content, none of it was enough to link him to her disappearance. There were no fingerprints, no blood, no signs that he had ever entered Mary's home or taken her. His alibis were weak, but not provably false. He claimed he hadn't seen Mary in over a year. When questioned about the paintings, he said they were visions he had, not observations. The police searched his property thoroughly, but found no physical evidence of a crime. No clothing, no personal belongings of Mary's, no signs of struggle. And yet, the way Orrin talked about her chilled even the most seasoned detectives. His obsession was undeniable, but obsession alone wasn't a crime. In the absence of proof, the investigation hit another wall. The media latched onto Orrin's name, and public opinion turned against him. He became the town's silent suspect, avoided at grocery stores and cursed under breaths. Still, legally, he walked free. And for Kata, the Murphy family, it felt like betrayal. Mary's brother Nolan was furious. He believed Orrin knew more than he let on. But with no support from the court, he took to social media, posting scans of the burned letter and images of Orrin's artwork. The public attention returned briefly, but the authorities urged caution. Accusations without evidence could ruin lives and distract from the real trail. But behind the scenes, Detective Marla Day wasn't done. She believed the answers weren't in Orrin's house, but somewhere Mary had loved, the forest. If someone had been following her, perhaps he hadn't just watched. Maybe he had created something hidden, something no one had seen yet. She ordered a drone search of the surrounding woods to look for anything at all, that didn't belong. What they found, deep in the shadows of the forest, would shock them all. The aerial footage from the drone revealed something unexpected. About 1.5 miles from Marianne Murphy's cottage, hidden deep within the thick forest, was a small, unnatural clearing. It was not visible from any path or trail, and it didn't appear on any local maps. From above, it looked like a perfect circle carved out of the wild landscape. The vegetation around it was disturbed, but the space itself looked carefully maintained. In the center was a long, low structure with a metallic roof, partially covered with leaves and moss. It was camouflaged so well that it could only be seen from directly overhead. Detective Marla Day and a team of officers hiked to the location early the next morning. It took them nearly an hour to reach it through dense undergrowth and uneven terrain. When they arrived, they found what looked like a homemade greenhouse, a structure built from salvaged materials, glass panels, and wooden beams. Vines were growing along the outside as if someone had attempted to blend it into the forest. Inside, the air was damp, warm, and filled with the thick scent of wet soil and rare herbs. The greenhouse was thriving with exotic plants, many of which were not native to the area. Some were species that Mary had studied during her work. There were notes pinned to wooden stakes near the pots, written in a handwriting that seemed familiar. It matched the samples from Mary's research journals. Her influence was everywhere, from the arrangement of specimens to the botanical terminology. But something felt off. In the center of the greenhouse was a single narrow bed. It was not a place for sleeping. There were metal rings bolted into the floor next to it, and a thick rusted chain coiled on the floor. Blankets were folded neatly on top, and a water bottle sat nearby, half empty. Nearby, investigators found a plastic crate filled with canned food, energy bars, and medical supplies. It was clear. Someone had been held here. Swabs taken from the bed and floor tested positive for human DNA. Later that week, the results confirmed it. The hair strands belonged to Marianne Murphy. Further investigation uncovered fingerprints all over the greenhouse, many belonging to a man named Dexar Reeve. He was not on anyone's radar before. He had no recent connection to Mary's life. But when Detective Day searched through records of her past classes and workshops, Dexar's name showed up. 2 years ago, he had attended a botanical seminar where Mary had given a guest lecture. There were no photos of the two together, but Dexar had posted a blurry picture of Mary from across the room on a forgotten blog. The caption read, "Perfection in human form. She doesn't even know it yet." Dexar had a troubling past. A year before attending Mary's seminar, he was arrested for trespassing on a college campus in another state, reportedly following a female professor after hours. The charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, but a pattern was forming. After the seminar with Mary, Dexar disappeared from public view. No job, no school, no activity on social media. But someone had been ordering rare seeds and greenhouse supplies using a fake name and prepaid debit cards. Most of those deliveries were traced back to the outskirts of Harlow Bend. Dexar had created something hidden, a sanctuary, or a prison. It was hard to tell. He had constructed the greenhouse by hand and hidden it so well that no one would stumble across it. It was a perfect place to keep someone out of sight. To the investigators, it now looked less like a greenhouse and more like a stage, a place where he could play out a fantasy. And Mary, unwillingly, had been the center of it. The discovery of the greenhouse shifted the case entirely. Now there was physical proof that Mary had been taken and held. But still, there was no sign of her. No body, no trace of where she had gone after the last food can was opened or the water bottle was emptied. The question now wasn't just who had done it. They were closing in on that answer. The question that kept everyone awake at night was more horrifying. Was she still alive somewhere deeper in the woods? The hunt for Dexar Reeve had begun. Dexar Reeve was now the center of the investigation. With the greenhouse uncovered and DNA confirmed, the case was no longer a disappearance, it was a kidnapping. But Dexar had vanished. There were no active addresses, no credit history, no employment records, and no digital presence. He hadn't used a cell phone or bank account in over a year. It was as if he had prepared to live in the shadows for as long as it took. And now, he was somewhere out there, with time on his side and a deep knowledge of the land. Detective Marla Day, frustrated but determined, worked with federal agents to track his movements using old data, delivery drop-offs, wildlife camera captures, and satellite images. A breakthrough came when an off-grid hiker reported seeing a man in the woods weeks earlier. The hiker said the man was carrying a large backpack and looked thin, wild-eyed and silent. He had crossed a stream near a ruined watchtower that had long since fallen out of use. That area was marked as dangerous, with steep terrain and abandoned mine shafts. Teams were dispatched to canvass the area. The search was painstaking. The forest was thick and treacherous, and the deeper they went, the more it felt like walking into a place that belonged to someone else. Days passed with no sign of Dexar. Then, on the sixth day, a police dog picked up a scent near one of the collapsed mine shafts. Hidden beneath a pile of branches and old tarps was a narrow wooden trapdoor built into the ground. Inside, officers found a crude underground shelter carved into the earth. It was small and dark, with only a single battery-powered light illuminating the space. The walls were lined with old newspaper clippings, mostly about missing women, plant research, and survival techniques. In the corner was a cot and a box of journals. But the room was empty. Dexar wasn't there, and neither was Mary. The journals, however, were deeply disturbing. They revealed Dexar's twisted mind in chilling detail. He had written about Mary, for months, how he believed she was his guide, his earth angel, chosen to help him reconnect with the natural world. But over time, the tone of his writing shifted. The obsession turned darker, more violent. He wrote about her resistance, her fear, and how she needed to be reformed. One entry, dated just a week before the greenhouse was discovered, sent a wave of dread through the team. It read, "She's too loud now, always crying. I can't think. I need peace again. She will become one with the roots. She will become quiet." Search teams feared the worst. If she had still been alive by then, it was possible Dexar had harmed her shortly before abandoning the greenhouse. Yet despite the ominous tone, there was no proof she was dead. The forest was vast, and Dexar's hiding spots had proven shockingly elaborate. Hope flickered that she might still be alive, trapped, waiting. Meanwhile, the investigation widened. Dexar's background revealed more disturbing details. As a child, he had lived on the edge of Harlow Bend with his reclusive grandmother, who was known for her strange herbal remedies and survivalist lifestyle. After she died, Dexar had disappeared into foster care. But investigators now believed he had returned to the land he knew best, reclaiming the forgotten spaces his grandmother once occupied. A map found in the underground shelter showed symbols, marking old wells, dried-up riverbeds, and forest clearings. It was a blueprint for survival, and possibly for imprisonment. One location stood out on the map, a red X over a place labeled Low Hollow. No records existed of it, and locals didn't recognize the name. But old forestry files mentioned a sinkhole site by that name, located near the forest's edge. It had collapsed decades ago and was considered inaccessible. 2 days later, officers reached the site. They found another hidden entrance, this time leading to a deep cavern beneath the roots of ancient trees. What they discovered inside would become one of the most horrifying revelations in Harlow Bend's history. But before that truth came to light, something even more shocking happened. Dexar Reeve was found, not by police, but by a trapper walking the forest alone. And he wasn't fleeing, he was waiting. The trapper who stumbled upon Dexar Reeve had been following a trail of snares near Low Hollow when he saw the man sitting silently by a tree, legs crossed, eyes wide open. Dexar wasn't hiding. He wasn't running. He appeared as though he had been waiting for someone, not the police, not rescuers, just someone to finally notice. The trapper, sensing something was off, kept his distance and contacted authorities using his emergency radio. Within hours, the forest was swarming with officers. Dexar didn't resist arrest. He said nothing during the initial detainment, offering only a single chilling statement during transport. "She's part of it now. She chose to be." What that meant wasn't immediately clear, but investigators feared the worst. With Dexar in custody, the search of Low Hollow intensified. Inside the cavern beneath the forest floor, officers found what Dexar had spent months, maybe years, building. It was a chamber of earth and stone, reinforced with timber and lined with moss and dirt. The space was cold and damp, lit faintly by flickering solar-powered lanterns strung along the walls. In the center was a small altar-like structure built of twisted roots and bones. Animal, they hoped. Nearby, clothing scraps were found, a flannel shirt, part of a scarf, and hiking boots. One of the items was unmistakably Mary Ann Murphy's. In the far corner of the chamber, a tunnel descended into the dark. It was narrow and unstable. Only one officer could fit at a time. As they moved down slowly, voices echoed back, shallow breathing, whimpering. The team paused, afraid of what they might find. But when they reached the end, they discovered something no one had expected. Mary. Alive. She was weak, underweight, and terrified, but she was breathing. She had been kept in a small hollow behind a false wall made of stone and branches. The space was no more than 5 feet wide and just tall enough for her to sit. Mary had been surviving on canned food, water from a drip system Dexar had constructed, and sheer willpower. Her legs were bruised and her eyes were hollow, but her first words were clear. "He told me the forest would keep me." Mary had been held captive for almost 4 months. She recounted harrowing details to investigators over the following days. Dexar had lured her into the woods, pretending to be an injured hiker. Once close enough, he drugged her and carried her to the greenhouse. For weeks, he treated her like a sacred object, demanding she connect with nature and listen to the forest. When she refused to cooperate with his delusions, he punished her by silence, isolation, and eventually transferring her deeper into the earth. Mary believed he intended to keep her there forever, as some kind of spiritual offering to the forest he worshipped. The town of Harlow Bend was shaken. What had started as a missing persons case had uncovered something much darker. A man who had built a fantasy world from obsession and dragged a woman into it without remorse. Dexar never admitted guilt. During his interrogation, he remained emotionless, reciting riddles, botanical facts, and passages from his journals. He showed no concern when informed that Mary was alive. The trial began 6 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos, journal entries, the greenhouse, the cavern, and most importantly, Mary's testimony painted a vivid and horrifying picture. Dexar Reeve was found guilty of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and multiple counts of aggravated assault. He was sentenced to life in a psychiatric facility without parole. Mary Ann Murphy's recovery was slow. Physically, she healed with time. But emotionally, the scars ran deep. She moved away from Harlow Bend, changed her name, and stayed away from the public eye. But she did leave behind one final note, published anonymously in a local paper. It read, "The forest is no longer my sanctuary, but I survived it, and that is my strength." The case became a landmark in forensic investigation, showcasing how obsession, when left unchecked, can rot into something unrecognizable. It taught law enforcement the value of persistence, of reading between the lines, and of trusting that sometimes even the most hopeless cases can be solved. The twisted case of Marianne Murphy had come to an end. But in Harlow Bend, the shadows of the forest would never feel the same again.